Hello and welcome to our Beginner Quilting series with Quilt Addicts Anonymous, and I'm Stephanie Soebbing. I'm going to take you through everything you need to know to become a quilter. There's a pattern that you can download for free over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com that you can use to go along with these video tutorials. And when you download it, we're going to send you a free coupon code to get 20% off anything that you need for this project. That's going to be good on all the supplies I'm going to show you for this video, as well as any fabrics from QT Fabrics. QT Fabrics proudly sponsors this video tutorial series from Quilt Addicts Anonymous. Check out their fabrics and join the fabric fun over at qtfabrics.com. They imagine so you can create. So you kind of need a lot of stuff to get started with quilting. There are a lot of great gadgets and tools out there to make your life easier when it comes to quilting, and I'm going to go over what they are, what they do, because some of the names sound a little funny, and why you need them. So this video has the absolute basics of things that you should get in order to get started. There's lots of great other tools out there that can aid you further than what I've got here, but this is kind of like my essentials kit, and I'm going to show you some high-end stuff. Like if you just want to ever buy one pair of scissors for the rest of your life, we'll show you which ones to get. But if you are trying to do this on a budget, then we'll show you some budget-friendly options as well. So let's get started on everything that we need. Obviously, we need a sewing machine. Now, this does not have to be a fancy sewing machine, but if you are using a sewing machine that you've had for a long time, like one of the metal models from the 1970s that maybe you purchased at Sears or Kenmore, you probably want to go and get it cleaned and serviced, because if it's been a while, it probably has built up some dust, even if you haven't used it, and it could benefit from a really good cleaning in order to get that going the way it should be. If you purchase something at a big box store, you may also run into challenges depending on the quality of the machine that you purchased. So that doesn't mean that you have to go out and buy one that's thousands and thousands of dollars to get started, but if you have something already, get it cleaned, get it serviced, make sure it's running correctly and you know how to use it and thread it. That's the most important thing. And if you want to upgrade later, you certainly can. The one that I have, I sew on one that I got, it's kind of like a mid-level beginner, and it's just because I wanted a second machine to have at home. I have a quilt shop as well, and I was getting tired of bringing my machine back and forth. So I bought one for about $500 on sale, and I wanted it to do two things: sew a 1/4 inch stitch and be able to do binding and quilting on it if I needed to with a walking foot. And it does those two things. That may seem like a lot of money for something that I just want it to do two things. It does a lot more than that, but for quilting, that's what's important. And what you're paying for is a machine that is going to function the way you want it to. I'm not having any issues with feed dogs with this. It's not eating my threads. I have zero tension issues with this machine. Whenever I do have problems, it's my fault. I've threaded it wrong, or I haven't cleaned it out the way I should. So those are all things that you're paying for when you pay for something at a bigger price tag. So what you really need, and this is the number one thing, and we'll do a whole video on your 1/4 inch seam, is you need a machine that either has a 1/4 inch stitch setting. Mine does. So if you look at your manual, you may see it may say a 1/4 inch stitch, it may say a quilting stitch, it may call it a piecing stitch. But what it means is the needle on your sewing machine is a 1/4 inch away from the edge of your presser foot when you are sewing. And so this machine did not come with a 1/4 inch foot, which is this right here. This is a 1/4 inch foot. So if I'm going to measure from the center of this needle to the outside of this foot, it's going to be exactly a 1/4 inch. So you can always buy one of these. But what's easier to do is, if your machine has it, you can just turn it on, and all I have to do is, in this case, move it to stitch number 15, and my needle already moves itself so that I have a standard 1/4 inch stitch with this. So either get a machine that has a stitch like that built in, or you can buy a foot that has a 1/4 inch presser foot. And we'll go over how to use all that and why it's important to sew a 1/4 inch seam in one of our later videos. But these are two things that you want to look for when you're getting a machine. And if your machine doesn't have that, say you have an older one, you bought it at a big box store, not a big deal. You can always purchase the 1/4 inch foot separately. So that's a good thing to have. So the other thing that you want to have is a walking foot. Now some machines come with this, some of them you have to purchase separately. If they came with it, it's usually in your little toolbox that came with your machine. So this contraption, I actually sewed an entire queen size quilt, Stitch in the Ditch quilting, without one of these because I thought it looked so weird. I didn't know what it was. So that was my first big quilt. So don't do that. I know it looks really funny. It has this weird claw thing on it. And what it does is it has feed dogs on the top as well. So there's feed dogs on the bottom of your machine, and then there's feed dogs on this walking foot. And this little claw clamps on to your machine, so when the needle goes up and down, it moves the feed dogs on top up and down at the same time as your feed dogs on the bottom. What that does is it moves all three layers of your quilt together when you have your top, your batting, and your backing together. So when you're doing binding, applying binding, or if you're doing straight line quilting, which we're gonna do in this video tutorial series, this is an essential tool to have. You can usually get them for under $30 for a generic universal one, but if you get one that's specific to your machine, like Baby Lock has one that's specific to their machine, you may pay a little bit more money just to get one that's specific to that. But you can always get a universal one, and those are usually under $30. So this is an essential tool that you absolutely have to have. So of course we need thread, and one of the biggest things that I see people do when they come in for beginner quilting is they either inherited some thread collection or they bought stuff a long time ago and they have like 20-year-old thread that they're trying to sew with. Well, thread has come a long way, and you know, that kind of thing just doesn't hold up over time. Like I have some doll clothes that I got when I was little, and I was getting them out for my daughter, and the elastic has literally like fallen apart on them. It just disintegrates over time. So you don't want to use super old thread, and you want to try to get thread that's going to work well with your machine. I exclusively use Aurifil thread to piece with, and I usually buy either the white, this is color 20, 21, or the gray, and this is color 26, 15. Now thread comes in different weights. I choose to sew with a 50 weight cotton thread for my quilting, and I do that for piecing whenever I'm piecing, and then also if I'm doing quilting on my home sewing machine, I use Aurifil exclusively. It's a really low lint thread, and that's important because lint will build up in the bottom of your sewing machine, and you need to clean that out every once in a while. Otherwise it will gunk up, your feed dogs won't work right, and eventually your sewing machine will stop moving. I know this from experience. So you want to make sure you're cleaning it out. The more you can have it to where it's not going to get as dirty in the first place, and you can do that by choosing a good thread that is not going to be linty, then Aurifil is a great choice for that. It also lasts and lasts and lasts. I wrote a book, and in it I had to make 12 quilts of varying sizes from lap to bed size. And I did it with 2 spools of this Aurifil thread. It's 1,300 meters on a spool, and this just lasts and lasts and lasts. So even though they're $14, it is just an awesome thing, and it will last forever and ever and ever, and it eventually will run out, but you will feel very accomplished because that means you've done a lot of sewing if you finally run out of this thread. So I always piece with the white or the gray, and then when I get to quilting, I will choose a different color that matches my top and my bobbin. So of course we need some fabric, and we're gonna have a video specifically about fabric substrates. A fabric substrate is the base gray good that the fabric is printed on, and that quality varies considerably based on where you buy it, what manufacturer made it, and what type of material it is. So quilting cotton is different than like polyester broadcloth that you might find in a big box store, and even 100% cotton quilting fabric will be a different level of quality based on what you can find at a quilt shop, which is going to buy high-end, very good stuff, versus a big box store where you may pay $2 a yard for something, but it just is going to be scratchy and it isn't going to hold up over time, and you're putting so much time and money into this. You want a product that at the end that's going to last and that you're going to be able to love and wash, and you're not going to have to worry about it falling apart or becoming threadbare. And so it's worth it to spend a little bit extra money on a little bit better quality fabric. Most quilting cottons are going to run between $10 and $12 a yard, depending on who the designer is, who the company is, whether it's a basic, which a basic is kind of a line that is meant to sort of blend with focus prints. So like this butterfly would be a focus print because it has really cool stuff going on. And this dot would be closer to a basic. Or if it has like a big designer name to it, then it's going to be a little bit more sometimes. And it really just depends on the quality of fabric as well. But you want to look for something that retail price is between $10 to $12 a yard. That usually means it's a really good fabric. It's going to hold up well. It's going to stand the test of time. Obviously, QT Fabrics is sponsoring this video tutorial series, so that's what we're going to be using for this quilt that we're making as part of it. But I really like their fabrics. I do a lot with their designs. I really love the way they feel, and they're very soft. And you know, like I knit some too, and it's kind of like, you know, if you're going to spend so much time touching and feeling this stuff, you want it to feel nice on your hands while you're working with it and not be like scratchy and cheap, and you don't want it to feel that way. And especially if you're giving it to somebody as a gift, you know, if you're giving somebody a baby gift and you have this rough feeling material, that's not going to be as great for that baby as it is if you have a nice soft high quality fabric. So obviously we need some needles, and there's a tendency to like never change your needle. You probably should change your needle after every quilting project that you do. So you finish a quilt, you just get a new needle out, and then it won't mar your fabric. I really like these Schmetz chrome quilting needles. I like them because I can use them for the entire project from start to finish. I can use it for piecing, and I can use it for quilting and binding, and it's still going to work through that. If you've ever done garment sewing, there's different types of needles out there. There's universal, there's ballpoint. The tips of them are all kind of designed to do different things. So if you get these quilting needles or ones that are designed for it, this one has 90/14 is the needle size. I really like these. That's what I use for all my quilting projects. So obviously we need some scissors to be able to do this. Now, you don't actually use scissors as much as you think you would. It's not like garment sewing where you like literally have to cut out everything, but you do want to have a good pair of scissors. So if you get Gingers, that is like the end all be all of scissors. You can get them sharpened when they get to dull out. It is the only scissor you will ever have to buy for the rest of your life. That comes with a price tag. They're sort of the high end scissor. The other option is you can always go with something that's by Fiskars. That's a really good brand. They have cute designs. They're not going to be as sharp. It's not really worth getting them sharpened over time. But what you really want to do is get a pair of scissors, and that pair of scissors is now your fabric scissors. You will never use that for paper again. You will shoot your significant other if they attempt to open plastic packaging for the latest device with it. Everybody will know that these are your fabric scissors and they are off limits for everything else. And that's because when you use it for other things, it will dull the blade faster. And I even had one time my husband used my fabric scissors to like open some sort of electronics package, and the alignment was literally off when it was done. I was so mad at him about it. And then those became paper scissors because there really is no coming back from it after that. They just don't cut as well. They're not going to do a good job for you. So get a pair of scissors, whatever it is, and those forevermore are your fabric scissors, and nobody else can touch them but you. And get very serious about this with your people in your household so that they know no one touches these scissors. They're very important. So I have this kind of as an optional supply, but I actually use these more than I use my big scissors, and that is my little embroidery scissors. Ginger makes a really cute one. They're adorable. They cut really well. I have stabbed myself with them and drawn blood before, so they're very sharp. But what I actually really like are these microtip spring action ones. And if you have like arthritis problems or problems with your hands, these are really great because it has a spring loaded. So it wants to open up. And so when you're trimming, it will automatically just open right back up for you. So you just have to worry about that closing action, and then it will come open for you. And when you're done, you just slide this little guy back in place, and then it stays closed. This one's also very sharp, so you don't want to leave these where kids can get a hold of them. But I use this all the time. Whenever I'm cutting threads, we're going to show you how to chain piece in this video tutorial series. So when I'm cutting apart all my pieces for chain piecing, I use these constantly. This is like my go-to tool for almost all cutting. So we need some pins, right? We're going to have to pin some stuff together when we're quilting in order to get those great joints. I really love these flat flower head pins. And you can use really any type of pin. I've used any type of pin. I like these because they lay nice and flat on the sewing machine as I'm going through, and they're really easy to grab that pink tip and pull them out. And they come in this little plastic container so they can stay in there. They fit in there nicely. It fits right next to my sewing machine when I'm sewing, so I can just pull them out, put them right in there, and I don't need a pin cushion. I really like these a lot, but if you have a stash of pins, you can continue to use them. But just like, if we talked about old thread, pins can dull out over time. And so if you've used them a lot, or maybe somebody else who used to sew in your family, like you've got grandma's pins that were passed down, if they're seeming dull and it's hard to get it through the fabric, or they seem excessively thick, and they're like leaving holes when you pull it out, then maybe it's time to upgrade and get new pins. And I really recommend these flat flower head pins. They're fabulous. All right, so now it's time for some more cutting stuff that we need. So we have rotary cutters, and if it has been a while since you've been quilting, like say you started quilting before the existence of the rotary cutter, these may seem very foreign. You may remember tracing templates out and cutting them with scissors. You don't have to do that anymore. The rotary cutter used in conjunction with a acrylic ruler and your cutting mat will completely change the way that you cut fabric. Rotary cutters come in different shapes and sizes, and we'll show you exactly how to use these in another video tutorial when we cover how to cut fabric. But just so you know, there are two main ways to do it. One, and this is the least expensive one, is this one that looks like a pizza cutter. And what you do is you slide this up, and then the blade is exposed. These blades are very sharp, so you want to make sure that it's always in the safety position when you're not using it, because otherwise you can really hurt yourself with it, especially if you've got little kids around. But this one, you just cut straight across like this. And so if you notice, like my wrist is doing like one of these when I do it, which is not great if you have any problems with your wrist, or if you're doing a lot of cutting, it can really cause fatigue, which is where they came up with this one. This is an ergonomic version. It has a safety in it, so I can engage it, and then when it's engaged, I can't squeeze that, so good if you've got kids around. But all you have to do is squeeze it, and the blade comes out, and when you let go, it automatically goes in the safety position. This one works more like the pizza cutter, where you're gonna cut across like this. And so you don't have the same like wrist strain like I did with the other one. It's gonna be more of a straight wrist when you're using it. So it's a little bit more expensive, but if you have problems with your wrist, that's a good one to use. Now this Martinelli one, those two are by Olfa, is very different. It looks way different than all the rest of them. If you have never quilted before, I would not start with this rotary cutter because it's kind of weird to get the hang of. But if you have problems with your wrist or your hands, or arthritis or anything, this is a really good one. This is what I use at the shop when we're doing a lot of cutting for kits, because it really like saves my wrist. Like we will cut 200 or so kits a month, and it's multiple cuts per kit. And so it's a lot of cutting, and it really can get your hands sore fast. And this one's cool because it has a little spot for your thumb and a spot for your forefinger, and then your hand is on there. So when you're going, like there's no bending of the wrist whatsoever. It's very fluid motion, and it just is really easy on your hand. So if you have arthritis problems, this is a really good one to use. Or if you have issues with your hands or wrists at all, or you just plan on doing a boatload of cutting, the Martinelli is really good for that. But if you're just starting out, I would go with one of the Olfas, either the straight or the ergonomic, and either of these can be switched around for right or left hand use. So like this one, it's set up for a right-handed person, but all you would do is you would take these parts off and you would flip it over to this side, and then you could cut as a left-handed person, and that would work out just fine. Okay, so what you're seeing in the background here, this green part, this is my mat, and I recommend that you get one that's at least 18 by 24. That way you're going to be able to cut across the width of fabric. And again, we'll have a video tutorial series on how to do that. But almost every single quilting pattern you get is going to tell you to cut across the width of fabric. So you want something where your width of fabric is going to be shorter than the mat. And so most width of fabric, so widest it's going to be is 22 inches. So if you have a mat that's 24, then you're going to be able to cut without having to move anything. And what this does is it protects your table and your workspace, because if you were to just slice and dice on your dining room table with one of these, you would ruin it and you would be very sad and it would not work out very well. So you absolutely need to have a cutting mat. Now you also are going to need some tools to go with that. This is a ruler and we'll show you how to use all these. It's really cool. I like this one because it's frosted, so you can see that it kind of dulls the colors underneath, which makes it a little bit easier to read all the dash marks on there. So I really like the frosted line of rulers from Olfa. You need at least the 6 by 24 inch ruler, and that's so you can cut your strips by your width of fabric. So if you get started, make sure you get one of these. And this is optional, but really handy. They also make a 6.5 inch one. And so that's really good for when you're cutting smaller squares from your strips. You can do it all with the long ruler, but if you just like to make your life a little easier, the 6.5 inch one is really a good one to have as well. This is also the frosted ruler from Olfa. So safety pins, you may have these hanging around the house, but what I would recommend is getting one that is at least like an inch long. What we're going to use these for is at the end we have to layer and baste our quilt, and that means we have to get all 3 layers of the quilt together and secure before we quilt it. So what we need to do for that is pin it together. There's lots of ways to do that, but the way we're going to do it in this class is with safety pins. It's nice because you don't have to worry about taking anything outside and using spray base and getting everything just right. You can just lay things out, layer them up, and pin them together until you are able to secure it with your quilting stitches. So I recommend that you purchase a set of safety pins that are specifically recommended for quilting. These actually have a little bit of a curve to them, which makes it a little easier when you are pushing it down to get the pins in. So grab some of those. This one has 65 in it. If you have 2 of these, that's probably going to be all that you need. But I know I tend to leave them in my quilt for a while and I keep forgetting where I put them. So I probably have hundreds around the house because I just keep going to buy more when I can't find the ones I had. But these are good to have, and then you can store them in a little tin and have your big stash. So we're also going to need some batting. I use Quilter's Dream batting exclusively on my quilts. I really like it because it doesn't get all bunched up and wrinkly in the packaging. They do a really good job of keeping it nice and smooth, which makes it easy to get a nice smooth quilt sandwich when you're laying all your fabrics together. We're going to show you how to do that in a later video. It comes in lots of fibers, and we'll talk about that later. But what I prefer when I'm quilting on my home sewing machine is a natural fiber. Something that's cotton or a poly cotton blend. And the reason why I prefer that is because your fabric is cotton, and so it's going to stick to cotton batting. And that's really handy when you're quilting on your home sewing machine because it's not going to slip and slide and get all out of order when you're doing it. Whereas if you were to choose a polyester batting, your fabric might slide against that, and then all the time we take to layer and baste it together, you're just going to keep fighting with it on your sewing machine. So natural fibers are great for batting. We'll talk more about that later, but you definitely are going to want some batting to make your quilt nice and warm in between. And I wouldn't skimp on batting either. It's really easy to just go and buy something cheap at the store, and especially polyester is less expensive than cotton, but you're going to fight with it a lot less, and it's going to stand up the test of time when you're doing it. Because the last thing you want to do is get your quilt all quilted, throw it in the wash, and then you wash it a couple times and your batting starts to shred and fall apart, and then you have lumps and bumps everywhere, and that's just not fun. You don't want to have that in your quilt. So don't skimp on your batting. All right, this is the last thing. This is optional, but I highly recommend it. These are Machiner's quilting gloves. They have little grippies on the fingers, and they're fabulous because it's a lightweight glove, so you can wear it in the summertime and not get too overheated if you're working on a quilt. But the grips kind of help you move the fabric along in your sewing machine as we're doing quilting, and it really eases up on that wrist strain. Because quilting, it may seem like, okay, I'm just sitting here and I'm sewing, but it can be kind of hard on your body because you're standing up, you're leaning over, you're cutting stuff, you're pushing the weight of an entire quilt through the sewing machine for a couple hours at a time, and more if you're on a deadline, you're really trying to get it finished. And anything you can do to make your life easier and to make it have less strain on your body, the better. So these Machiners quilting gloves are great for that. We'll go over how to use them and why they're fabulous in our videos on machine quilting and also binding. That's when I use mine. Anytime I'm doing machine quilting on my machine, or if I'm doing binding on my machine, I always pull these out. Well, that is everything that you need to get started quilting. I know it's a lot of stuff, and so what we're doing is we don't want cost to be a barrier for you guys to get started, and we don't want you guys to like start with some cheap stuff and regret it and then have to go spend more money to buy something that's better later. The story that I always tell is I was once teaching a beginner quilting class, and this woman had a sewing machine that she had spent several $1,000s on. It was a very high-end, very expensive sewing machine, and she had bought fabric from a big box store, and she was having the worst time, and it was because the fabric would not hold its shape because it was too cheap and it kept stretching out of place, and it just was not working for her. And I was like, you just need to go spend the money, go buy some fabric here and try it again. And it was just a table runner. It wasn't a very expensive thing. She could have spent $20 on fabric at the quilt shop and had a much better experience. So we want you guys to have a good experience from day one. And so I want you to be able to get the good stuff. So we are offering a 20% discount. It's a one-time coupon code that you can use to get anything that you see in this video. That we have at Quilt Addicts Anonymous, and it's good on all QT fabrics. So what you need to do is go over to shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, and we'll have a link directly to the pattern that goes with this tutorial series, along with a bunch of downloads on your supply list and different tips and tricks for each video tutorial series. So you'll be able to get that. You can download the instructions, get your supply list, and then you're also going to get your coupon code. And you can get anything that you need to make this project in a one-time purchase, and you'll get 20% off your entire purchase of items that are included in this list. So that you can get that over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Make sure to click on the link in the description for this video, and we'll take you straight to the pattern for this, and you'll get everything you need to get started, plus that coupon code, so that way you can get your stash going and get all the supplies that you need. I hope you enjoyed this video. Next up, we're going to talk about fabric substrates and why they matter. So we're going to talk about the different types of fabrics that you can buy, what can be used in quilting, and what is better left to garments, and why it matters to buy from a quilt shop versus a big box store. So check that video out, and make sure you go to shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com to get everything you need for this video tutorial series. And a big thanks to QT Fabrics for sponsoring this video. I'm able to bring this content to you for free because they made this video tutorial series possible. So thank you to QT Fabrics. Go check them out at qtfabrics.com. Thanks so much, and happy quilting!